Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 22nd Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1949. Joseph L. Mankiewicz arrived with a fun comedy drama about wives and their husbands in the years after World War II called A Letter to Three Wives. The film went on to earn 3 Oscar nominations, winning for Best Director and Best Screenplay. But it was All of the King's Men that won Best Picture and 3 other awards on Oscar night. So why did A Letter to Three Wives come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to A Letter to Three Wives. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host Kevin Jacobson, and we are now in the 40s. We're getting very close to the beginning / the end of this era of the show and the beginning of Oscar history, and we are now into the 40s, and we're starting with 1949 and A Letter to Three Wives. And joining me, we have someone who is doing the rare feat of first appearing on a bonus episode and now graduating to a regular episode. You last heard him talking about Lost in Translation with Kieran Scarlett at the end of last year. Writer for the Film Experience and host of the Sundays with Cate podcast. Please welcome back to the show, Murtada Elfadl.
Hello. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, and so soon.
Have I been promoted? Is this a promotion from
This
bonus?
is. Congrats.
Oh, wow. I'm so excited.
It's a
Wow.
rare honor. Not many people have done this.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So, and you also have the responsibility of kicking off the 40s of this show. No pressure.
No pressure at all. But it's such a great movie to talk about. I love this film.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Let's get into A Letter to Three Wives. First, a summary of the film. It is a comedy drama film based on the 1945 novel A Letter to Five Wives by John Klempner, and tells the story of 3 women who are middle to upper class who run in the same circle and are set to go on a riverboat to benefit underprivileged children, and they receive a letter from a woman named Addie Ross informing them that she has run away with one of their husbands, but she won't disclose which one. And so we then go into flashbacks of all 3 women's lives as they sort of wonder if it could have been their husband. And first we have Deborah Bishop, who met her husband in the Navy and doesn't really feel like she fits in with her husband's friends. And then there's Rita Phipps, who is a writer for radio dramas and the wife of a school teacher named George. And finally, we have Laura May, who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, literally right by a railroad track, and used her ambition to sort of get herself out of her situation and marry a wealthy businessman named Porter. And all 3 of their lives are sort of intertwined, while the mystery of Addie Ross sort of lingers over everything. And the film was written and directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz. It stars Jean Crane as Deborah, Ann Southern as Rita, and Linda Darnell as Laura May. Plus we got Jeffrey Lynn, Kirk Douglas, and Paul Douglas as their husbands. There's also Thelma Ritter in an uncredited role, and Celeste Holm as the voice of Addie Ross, our narrator. And A Letter to Three Wives went on to earn 3 Oscar nominations, but they were 3 very important Oscar nominations, winning 2 of them, but not Best Picture. So, Murtada, you already previewed that you enjoy this film, so what are your general thoughts on A Letter to Three Wives?
I really like this film. I have seen it a few years ago, and then I watched it again to talk to you this week, and I was just taken by how well directed it is. Like, a lot of it is long conversations happening in rooms. And it's somehow Joseph Mankiewicz, I don't know what he did with the camera, but he makes this basically drama that takes place in these small rooms, very expansive. Like his camera, the movement of his camera, you're always watching, you're entrapped by the story and then by the acting. But I think it's really a feat of direction to make this, in a sense, a small drama in that it just concerns a few people, even though it concerns the institution of marriage, but it is about a few people and they're just talking with each other. It makes it so big and epic, I thought. That's what I really loved about it. Plus, of course, the script is very, very witty.
Yeah. This is a film that is sort of like what I talked about a few weeks ago, actually, on Second Thought, which was Gosford Park, where there is this central conceit of this being like a mystery sort of who done it, which husband did Addie Ross run away with, but that's not really all the film is about, you know? And it's using that sort of clever trope to reveal something deeper about this sort of society at the time. And, here we have these three women who run in the same circle, but they are very different people. One is this farm girl who doesn't feel like she belongs in this sort of society. One is this career woman who's all about work, and the other is a woman who is ambitious, who pulls herself up by her bootstraps and sort of makes things happen for herself. So what you have here is this picture of women, white women in suburbia, who are of means, but dealing with very specific anxieties of being a woman in this time period right after World War II. So
I mean, it is, to your point, very specific about that time, that post-war American time, where people were coming back from the war and trying and building their lives. It was a time of prosperity, which sort of all these families, these three women and their husbands, are upwardly mobile. But also, to your point earlier about how one of them is, a farm girl that maybe doesn't belong, there is commentary on class that you never sort of get in American movies, especially American movies of that time. So that was interesting. And I found that character played by Linda Darnell to be the most interesting of the three. And the story, once, we flash back to tell the story of each character. And those flashbacks were, I think, where the movie was most successful and most gripping, because that story was really interesting. And all the actors there were not just Darnell, but I don't know the actress who played her mother, but she was great. But also, the name is
Thelma Ritter.
Thelma Ritter.
Yes.
How could I forget Thelma Ritter? Thelma Ritter is amazing. And she's uncredited, and I don't know why. But
me neither. This was one of her first films. And it's weird because, she does kind of have a presence in two different flashbacks. But, just not credited, sadly. Again, just sort of taken for granted.
She's so great in this film.
She's perfect for this specific character.
Yeah, she's such a firecracker. It is a smaller part, but you're like, maybe we could have a flashback about Sadie.
Yes.
How she came to know these women.
I would like to see it. And it's this sort of time capsule, I think, of this very specific moment in American history. And I think it does a pretty good job overall of fleshing out all three of these women and giving them complexity and differentiating themselves and sort of commenting on the status of how these women feel about their place in society and the world at this time.
And the script is it's very fast, it's very clever, it's very witty. There's the repartee going back and forth between all these characters, and even the mystery, which, to your point earlier, you said it's sort of a trope, but it is also, it keeps you guessing, because it's like, when he's doing the mystery, he's like peeling an onion. So as you go, you're finding more. And even when you go from one story to the other, the stories illuminate the other. So as you go, you know more about all the wives.
Definitely. And first of all, I sort of want to talk about the narrative device of this, where we have Addie Ross as our narrator. And I have to say, I don't know if you're a fan of Desperate Housewives, but you can really tell that Mark Cherry was inspired by A Letter to Three Wives, right? Because Mary Alice's narration in Desperate Housewives is so similar, right?
Yes, it is the same tone.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this disembodied voice that's just all knowing. She knows all that is happening in all these households, even though she's not in any of them.
Yeah. And it's just got like this playful sort of sly tone to it where she's like, I know what's going on here, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the one line I really enjoyed so much that I wrote it down is basically they're in a scene where the two girls are talking about how the conversation always seems to go back to Addie Ross, and then the narration comes in and she's just like, maybe it's because if you girls didn't talk about me, you wouldn't talk at all.
Yes, that was a very funny bit. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very fun, playful device that, I mean, I don't know how much that sort of thing was used at this time, but it certainly feels influential, especially on Desperate Housewives, but also other things as well.
Yeah, I think that's why the film was successful. It's sort of, the script feels like it was the thing, and it's just this narrative device and the flashback, but also just the mystery of it. I think maybe there weren't a lot of, I can't think of a lot of movies from the 40s who had that. Like, there is also a movie that has The Letter in the title. Betty Davis is The Letter, which starts at the end. That's from the early 40s. It starts at the end with a crime, and then it goes back to tell you, but it doesn't actually do flashbacks. It's so I think maybe flashbacks were new in 1949, or maybe I'm just talking outside my head. Who knows?
Well, I think the film, since it's presented in this way, we can probably just go through each of these three storylines one by one. Starting with Deborah, who I think Jean Crane probably has the trickier character here, because she doesn't have the kinds of bold characteristics that the other two have. She doesn't really feel like she belongs with the others, and I think that she plays it really well, just how disoriented she still feels with this new life that she's come into. And even visually, they do a great sort of dizzy scene where she's very drunk at this event, and it's all, she's looking around from her perspective, and she's just all foggy, and that's pretty good representative of her character.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at the presentation of how drunk she got. And it's sort of like, and the movie, you would think a movie from the 40s would be a little conservative, but, she went all out in that scene. And it is a very good scene. And you could see, and she is really good at sort of letting us know how drunk she's getting, and she gets drunker as the scene goes on. And you can see, like, there's different modulations of how drunk she is. And also, like, the foggy look that comes into her face when the camera sort of goes to her, and she looks very foggy. She's really good at doing that.
Yeah. And this character, she has the pressure of this unknown woman, Addie Ross, who everyone thought was going to marry her husband. So she spends a lot of the film being very anxious and uneasy, and, even if she doesn't maybe stand out compared to the others as much, I do think that she's pretty rock solid in this role.
Yeah, she's good. She wasn't my favorite, but she's good.
Yeah.
And also, like, I love, like, her dress in that scene.
Yes.
There's a whole subplot about how appropriate or inappropriate is a dress. So, another Betty Davis reference, because Betty Davis made a movie about her red dress, Jezebel, won an Oscar for it. Jean Crane didn't manage to get that far with a plot about a dress.
Right. But she is nominated this year for a different film called Pinky.
Yes. Oof.
Which we might get to perhaps later. But yeah, I think personally speaking, my favorite storyline is actually with Rita, who is Ann Southern, as a very successful writer for these radio soap operas. And I think her sparring with Thelma Ritter is just really fun. And yeah, but I mean, I know Thelma earned 6 Oscar nominations, but this, I think, easily could have been another one. Such a perfect scene-stealing supporting actress type. But
The
yeah,
whole, no nonsense
right.
person who doesn't take it from anyone. It's very fun to watch, and I'm sure it was fun to do for her too.
Yeah. But with Rita, I think she cares very deeply about her work, even if she sort of is giving in to the demands of people above her quite often.
Yes.
But I think Anne Southern just has kind of a radiant energy to her here. And this flashback is where you really see the Mankiewicz writing and how, he would later write All About Eve with that very sharp satirical stuff, the inside baseball about the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the Kirk Douglas stuff here is actually tapping into the sort of anxieties of these artist types who are just so sick of the cheap corporate sponsored content that's happening on the radio. And obviously that's sort of a thing that continues even nowadays in different forms. But
Yeah.
what do you think about this
Yeah,
storyline
and
here?
in each of the stories there is commentary on marriage. There is
Yeah.
always a marital problem. It's the, Jean Crane and her husband are unequal in that, she's coming from quote unquote the wrong side of town and he's richer. Here, Kirk Douglas earns less money than his wife, which is the
Mm-hmm.
dynamic in the story. And I sort of like that because they were common. This is the one where the inequality between the spouses, I think, is most pronounced because it is the sort of it is the source of the conflict in the whole story here.
Yeah.
Because Jean Crane is sort of like her conflict is that yes, the marriage is unequal, but also she doesn't fit where they live. But here, the main conflict is just that he earns less money. She's the one who quote unquote wears the pants. I think they do say that, right?
Yeah, something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked that, and I thought they played it well, both Douglas and Southern, and their chemistry was sparkling. You could see that they loved each other, but also there were things that were keeping them apart. So yeah, I agree. This was a good.
I think it's the most fun
Yeah,
storyline, personally. Yeah.
it's not my favorite again.
Right.
We are gonna. My favorite is obviously the third one, but
Yes, we'll get to it. Yeah.
it is like I think the movie builds crescendo because it starts with Jean Crane, then it goes to this story, then to Linda Darnell.
Right.
And to me, and maybe that's because the way I saw it, to me it was like we're going from good to better to best.
Right. I will say that it's interesting to have Kirk Douglas in this kind of a role that he wouldn't really often do very much, I don't think, of sort of being more of a subservient man to the woman he's married to. It's kind of an interesting thing that's also early in his career that
Hmm.
it's just kind of an inspired choice. And he does have kind of the alpha energy to him. And it's an interesting dynamic there.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah, and I think he probably played that part because he wasn't as big a star as he would become. Otherwise,
Right.
he might not have.
Later on, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny sometimes when you see like you're watching a Joan Crawford movie and you see or a Betty Davis movie and you see somebody like Humphrey Bogart in a small part or Kirk Douglas in this movie.
Right. Yeah. So then we have Laura May, who is, like we said, literally from the wrong side of the tracks at the start. And there's a lot of fun, broad comedy there with the fact that they're literally so close to the train tracks
Yeah,
that they're just, the house is shaking and they just have to brace themselves.
yeah, it was a very funny visual.
Yeah.
Um,
And
because they're shaking, literally shaking as
yes.
the train.
And they're just like so used to it by now that they're just waiting it out. But she is very ambitious and she knows exactly what she wants. And she has had a lot of life experience, even though she's still young. And we have kind of some screwball energy here in this storyline, too, where we have Laura May and her boss being so headstrong and almost butting heads, but like they weirdly work together.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And she's often kind of bewildering to him, but also he just can't really get enough of her. So I think Linda Darnell is the best in show
Oh,
here.
absolutely. I agree. Could
Yeah.
not agree more. She's so amazing, so magnetic. Yeah.
Hmm. She just has a charisma to her that
Yeah.
is so kind of infectious to watch. And she doesn't really go too over the top with it that maybe a lesser actress would do,
Hmm.
but she really does get to the heart of her character's ambition and just her sort of desire for security
Hmm.
in life after everything she's been through.
Yeah, I think it's the trickiest part because it's maybe the least sympathetic.
Mm,
Because outwardly she is presented as a sort of a gold digger,
yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
And all the other characters are basically calling her that. So it is presented to the audience as unsympathetic, but she manages to find a way to make you root for her. Because I was rooting for her all the time.
Yeah.
And I think she does that so well that then by the end, when, we're gonna spoil, when her true colors are sort of revealed, you're like, yeah, we knew all along. But also it's because of the performance, because she manages to modulate it so well that you're seeing kind of what the characters maybe see in her, but also what the truth of the person she's playing is.
Hmm. Yeah. What do we think of the final revelation here, where we can get into spoilers here, where all of the wives are together and we find out who Addie Ross ran off with?
Yes, and it's Linda Darnell's husband.
Yes.
But we do get a fake out first
Right.
because Gene Crane's husband doesn't appear back at the climax, and everybody's thinking that he's the one who went away with Addie.
Yeah, and she's just depressed and moping about. Yeah. But yeah, well, what do you think of the ending itself as far as the conclusion to this story? Because for me personally, I sort of think it's a little bit of a fizzling out compared to what we've seen before. But you
I mean,
know,
he had to choose one of the three,
I
right?
know.
At the end.
Yeah.
So there had to be a choice, and no matter what it was, I think just because everything that came before was so clever, that maybe the choice would have been disappointing anyway. But I think I enjoyed the fake out, even though I didn't believe it for a minute. I
Right.
I knew it wasn't going to be Gene Crane's husband because she is kind of presented as the star of the film. So I'm like, it's not going to be her, and especially she gets the emotional breakdown at the end, and she gets a big scene where she gets to basically do what we've been expecting will happen from that one of the women will admit that her marriage is in shambles and her husband has left her, and she does that scene, and it is the big emotional sort of star scene. But then that's immediately followed by, no, that's not you. That's not... So that was a little bit annoying because as somebody who loved Darnell, I wanted her to get the big emotional breakdown scene.
Right. But I do kind of enjoy the not really viciousness, but just like the fact that her husband just came forward in front of everybody and just was very open about it.
Yep.
And, the two of them seem to have like this open butting heads with each other, but like they weirdly respect each other in a way that I think the conclusion of that storyline was the most satisfying.
Yes, the Darnell storyline. And
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
this is sort of like has always been their MO together. Yeah, like there is obviously love and chemistry, but also there is a lot of friction, and it's kind of the friction that you see in some marriages. And both actors do play it well, and I agree with you. Their story was the most interesting because
Yeah.
of that friction. And it is a friction that is also like the other two couples have problems in their marriage, but this is the only marriage that was hot.
Right.
There is sexual tension in it, and you could see that these people probably had good sex,
Oh
which
yeah.
you don't get from the other couples. And I don't know, is that just because Linda Darnell is so hot,
Yeah.
or it's because it's written that way? I guess it's both.
I don't know. Yeah, there's she does have that sort of sensuality that naturally draws you in, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's there's something about just it feels like they're on the fine line of love and hate, where they just clearly have a passion for each other either way. Either way they go.
Mm.
That's you see why they're drawn to each other. But one other thing I wanted to touch on before we get into Oscars is the production behind the scenes. And first of all, like I said, it's adapted from a book called A Letter to Five Wives. So two of the wives were cut in the transition to film. And Anne Baxter was originally supposed to be in the film as a fourth wife, Martha, who has conflict with her husband over sort of how to raise their child. And the Daryl F. Zanuck made them just cut her storyline out completely because the film was running long, and
did they shoot it?
I don't really know if I read if they shot it. I just know that she was lined up to do it.
And then didn't.
And then they're just like, no. We're good with 3.
Wow.
But
poor Anne Baxter.
Yeah, but I mean, she would go on.
She gets all about it even the next year, which she's fine.
Right. But I also just think it's interesting that storyline would have had the added element of a child, because that's not really something that's involved in any of these 3 storylines, which is an interesting sort of omission, especially for the time period, to not even really be talking about kids. I don't think any of them have kids, right? So
no,
I don't know.
Even Kirk Douglas and Ann Southern, who seem to be the ones who've been married longer than the others.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's sort of interesting that feels weirdly missing given sort of the time period and the emphasis on getting married and having children and settling down, that wouldn't really even be touched on here. But
I guess it wasn't touched on because they cut it. So it was touched on and then it wasn't.
Right. Right. So in one way it does feel at least more focused here, where that's not that added element, that it's just about the relationships between these husbands and wives. But another one of the wives, the other one in the book that wasn't even going to be adapted. So her name was Geraldine. So I read. Sorry to that wife.
Yeah, she completely didn't make it. Wow.
Yes.
Do you know what her story was?
Let me just see if there's any details. Yeah, it says this was about her devoting excessive time and money to her singing career with few results.
Oh. Well, which sounds like another sort of career versus marriage story.
So it's a little redundant maybe with the Ann Southern.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I would have been interested to see a film that had 5 wives and 5 stories. That I don't know if that would just make it all feel lengthier. Obviously it would have to be, but I almost wonder if this was probably the right call in the end to just keep it at 3.
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise it would have been too long and maybe
redundant.
Yeah, redundant, and it wouldn't be as strong. Like, yes, I have a clear favorite in the stories, but I think all 3 are strong.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on the whole, you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but the direction itself, I think, is just really strong, and you can definitely sense that this was a director who was going to make All About Eve. They definitely feel like they're in the same sort of universe in a way of doing kind of a satire of contemporary women mostly.
Yeah.
So
and marriage
and
class
and all that.
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes, when you look at old movies and you're like, oh, it's another story and it's just these 6 characters and they're talking, this is going to be boring. But somehow he opens it up and it's not at all. Yes, the script is witty and the repartee between the characters is fun to listen to, but there is something about the direction and how he moves his camera that you're just at all times engrossed in this film.
Yeah, it draws you in. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was a very good director of actors,
Yes.
really knowing how to frame them and give them their moments. And also just, yeah, I mean, it's kind of going back to the All About Eve screwball sort of thing. Really a good director of ensembles and just
Yep.
theatrical sort of people just talking in a room and butting heads and going at it. So, yeah. I would say that for a movie that is now 71 years old,
Oh my God! Wow.
this kind of does weirdly hold up in a way that I
Yes.
wasn't necessarily expecting it to. I definitely had expectations that this would be a little dated in terms of maybe sexism and misogyny, that sort of thing. But, I think
It's the
generally,
opposite, right?
yeah,
Like, especially because of the Kirk Douglas and Southern story. Like, it's surprisingly modern for its time.
yeah. So even though I would say this is a film that might not be as known these days as others,
Mhm.
especially in his filmography, I definitely think it's worth checking out because it just does have that fun screwball energy to it often, and it has this really interesting undercurrent of these women who were just a few years after the war, and this is the state of society for this particular set of women. So,
Yeah.
I would say check it out if you haven't already.
Yes,
Any
I
any
agree
thoughts?
with that and say
Okay,
go do it right now.
good. Yes, and it's short. It's under 2 hours, in and out.
Yes.
So
If it was 5, it would have been long, and we don't want that.
yes, it would
3
have
is
been
perfect.
an epic. Yes. So when we come back, we will be discussing why A Letter to Three Wives ended up losing Best Picture in the end to All the
All the
King's
King's
Men.
Men.
A Letter to Three Wives. And what a letter! Right after John Kempner's story in Cosmopolitan magazine spread its great wave of mirth, 20th Century Fox bought it for filming. And here are the three wives as they appear in this superb screen entertainment. There's the wave who became a wife. There's the gold digger. And there's the career woman. Finally, there's the girl who wrote the letter, Addie Ross. Addie, just what did you put in that letter?
Oh, a number of things. But the important thing is in the last sentence. You see, girls, I've run off with one of your husbands.
Well, if that's her idea of a joke,
she's
she's extremely poor taste. I must say.
I'll tear her apart. I had my choice of any one of their husbands. Deborah's young and worldly husband.
Well, I've got to pick up Rita. You'll phone about tonight, won't you?
I told you I would.
It just so happens that the dress I bought that you picked out of Vogue that some woman happened to leave on the train is exactly the dress that Addie Ross wore to the concert 2 weeks ago.
Rita's charming helpmate.
All this work, you're overtired. You do too much.
What do you suggest I stop doing? This moronic radio trash with which I pay most of your bills?
Now, calm down.
And what do I go back to? Washing, scrubbing, ironing, and a life of taste and discrimination? I'm fed up with Addie Ross.
Laura May's rich and forceful provider.
You know how I feel about you.
How?
I'm only human, you know.
Living with somebody all the time, I'm not easy to get along with anyway. Set in my ways, I want to do what I want when I want. Why, if it's just a question of the right girl, wouldn't any man in the world want to marry you?
Not if he thought he could marry Addie Ross.
And we're back. So now we'll be discussing why A Letter to Three Wives lost Best Picture to All the King's Men. And A Letter to Three Wives was only nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Mankiewicz, and Best Screenplay also for Mankiewicz. And it won Best Director, and it won Best Screenplay. So, like I said, the only one it did not win was Best Picture. And go ahead. I know you're going to say something.
I'm surprised that none of the actors were nominated at all. And especially Linda Darnell, she was robbed. She should have been.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people did the quote unquote category fraud in the 1940s, but maybe that's the reason why. If all 3 of the actresses were going for Best Actress, then maybe that's why none of them were nominated. But I think Linda Darnell especially should have been nominated, especially when you look at who was.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jean Crane would, in fact, get a nomination for Pinky, like we said. And so before the Oscars, A Letter to Three Wives won the Writers Guild Award for Best Written Comedy. And All the King's Men won the Golden Globe, the Writers Guild for Best Written Drama, the DGA, and the New York Film Critics. So there was not a lot of suspense about what was winning Best Picture, from what I've read. That everyone pretty much knew that All the King's Men was winning this because it won pretty much everything else up to that point.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I look at the release dates, because I looked at the release dates because Jean Crane had Pinky. That was released in September, but A Letter to Three Wives was released in January. So basically it won the Oscar 14, 15 months after it was released.
Yeah. Yeah, which happens.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same as what we have now.
Yes, absolutely not. Yeah.
But let's get into sort of why we think A Letter to Three Wives did not end up getting there in the end compared to All the King's Men. I would say that one thing is that just there is a level of capital I importance going on with All the King's Men. Right?
Absolutely.
Where it's about political corruption and all of that. And you compare that to A Letter to Three Wives, and in a predominantly male Academy,
yes,
I don't know that they would gravitate towards that as much as a Best Picture.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it. It's about women. It doesn't feel as important or as a movie that should win Best Picture because it's about about the internal lives of these three women, as opposed to All the King's Men, which has a lot of things to say about, politics and America and the political system. So it just feels more important.
Yes, exactly. And I do think it's interesting, though, that it does not win for director or screenplay.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting because Robert Rossen was favored to win very heavily for Best Director, especially. And it goes to Mankiewicz here, which I don't know if you had a reason why you think that might have happened, but I think it's very curious.
It is curious. I really can't think of a reason why, because you would think, especially in those times, Best Film and Best Director usually went to the same movie.
Yep.
But I think the direction here is better, so maybe they just had good taste that year.
Yes. I think I would agree with that. Yeah. I just think this is operating on a stronger level as far as a satisfying experience, A Letter to Three Wives.
Yeah, absolutely.
To All the King's Men, that I think All the King's Men, if I could just get into my thoughts here, it's certainly a very prescient film about corruption in the world of politics and this outsider who becomes very corrupt and acts with selfishness. Sounds familiar, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Everyone knows. But I think there's also just a level of theatricality to that story and just the dramatic rise and fall of it all that something like A Letter to Three Wives, I think maybe just for the innovation of what it does with those flashbacks might have been something that was appealing to directors. And so, I sort of understand the split in a way.
Yeah. And maybe, probably All the King's Men was something expected, was that story. Whatever Robert Rosen did there was expected. But I think as I was surprised by how amazing the direction is and how he kept me, entrapped in the story, and just it's so watchable. And that is due to the direction. Maybe that's how people in the Academy felt in 1949. And that's why Joseph Mankiewicz won the award.
Yeah, and he would win back-to-back.
Yeah.
Because he won the next year for All About Eve. So, just to get into a little bit more of All the King's Men, we have 2 acting wins from All the King's Men. We have Broderick Crawford, who is this sort of character actor mostly before this, who wins Best Actor for the big political corrupt guy, Willie Stark. And I think that's very much in keeping with what the Oscars love. I'll just say
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very good performance, but it has like the big, loud, boisterous energy to it that tends to win Oscars.
Yes, it's a very obvious sort of Best Actor win. Like there's so many movies in that, so many performances in that vein that have won over the years.
And continue to do so.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's very showy.
Yeah. But we also have Mercedes McCambridge in her debut role, winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress.
Yes.
And,
I mean, she had a big scene. I think that's why she won.
Yeah. I love her very specific energy to her. Yeah. It's just so, like, nervy and neurotic almost. And she takes this character that I think could have been pretty unfocused and forgotten about, I guess, in different hands. And I think she makes it pretty complex. So I like her. My issue, honestly, with All the King's Men is that I just think it's not quite as hard-hitting as it could be. And that shift that the character makes once he's elected is almost too jarring. But, yeah, I mean, it's the capital I importance of it all, the corruption of man, all these Shakespearean sort of themes that... You know, I get it.
Yeah. I think it's obvious. Like, I think this is kind of what you were alluding to. It's never surprising. Like, wherever it goes, even if the turn is jarring, you sort of knew that something was going to happen. It's like whatever happens is just something you saw coming. It never surprises us in any way. Everything about it is obvious. The performances are obvious. The plot is obvious. Like the sort of commentary it wants to say is obvious. And I don't know, maybe it's obvious now. Was it as obvious in 1949? Probably.
That's what I'm curious about, is that we've been so inundated with political dramas of this sort that it's possible that we just sort of saw everything coming just from that. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, there were other sort of satires about politics, like The Great Dictator was in, you know, a movie that came a long time before this. I'm sure there were others that, you know, that are just not coming to me now.
Yeah. But it's solid. I don't think it's one of the worst Best Picture winners by any means. It's just not necessarily one of my favorites.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were saying about Mercedes McCambridge. I would actually vote for Ethel Barrymore in Pinky. She was so funny in that film.
Okay.
And she elevated that movie, which has a lot of problems. Like, Pinky is a movie... Do you want to tell people what Pinky is about?
We can get into that a little later.
Okay, all right. But
Let's
anyway,
just get into this Best Picture of it all. Okay, yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I think on the whole, this is more or less an open and shut case as far as why All the King's Men ultimately wins this. It is surprising to me in hindsight that no actors from A Letter to Three Wives were not nominated. I mean, even a Thelma Ritter, you know, would have made sense in supporting actress.
Supporting, absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you put any of the Three Wives in supporting?
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I just don't know how you make that call, honestly, as to who's lead, who's supporting between the three of them, because they just feel equal.
They do, and I don't even know who was like a bigger star in 1949.
Yeah, me neither.
So maybe it's Jean Crane, because the movie sort of starts with her and ends with her, so she gets just slightly little bit more than the other two.
Yeah.
But again, she had another movie that year, which, reading trivia online, I found out that Linda Darnell really wanted to play that part in Pinky, and Fox chose to give it to Crane.
Interesting. I wonder why.
I think Darnell would have been slightly more appropriate, just because she has darker hair.
Yes. We'll get into it.
Yes.
Okay. So we got a few questions from Twitter about A Letter to Three Wives that I just wanted to touch on here. Well, Cody Derricks already, I think we sort of already answered this in a way, but I just wanted to get it official here. He said, if you had to nominate one of the three wives, who would you pick?
Yeah, Darnell.
Linda Darnell. Yes. I think she makes the most of that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she was never nominated for an Oscar, and this would have been a good one for her. And so I don't know if I would have nominated the other two per se. Depends on I haven't seen all of the films nominated in Best Actress, but yeah.
I mean, I haven't either, but just looking at the names, Loretta Young, Deborah Carr, Susan Hayward, it seems like it's just people they like and have nominated several times during that time.
Yeah.
And Olivia de Havilland won.
Right. Well, this was from Johanna Fleur Matthias, who said Linda Darnell won the lion's share of critic raves for her performance in Three Wives, and many considered her absence a snub, especially since the Academy regarded the film highly enough to give it director and screenplay. Would she have posed a serious threat to de Havilland?
Perhaps not. I think de Havilland is such a force in The Heiress. She's the title character. The movie is all about her.
Right.
She charts a journey from beginning to end. So even though I love Darnell a lot and think she was amazing in the film, I just think de Havilland would have probably prevailed even if Darnell was nominated.
Totally agree. There was no competition. Olivia de Havilland was always winning this.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, would have loved to see a nomination for Linda here.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
From Catherine Short, here's a question. If there had been a fourth and fifth wife, who would you have cast in these roles from that time period? Well, I guess we can keep Anne Baxter as Martha.
Since she was cast anyway.
Yeah. That takes care of that, but we need a Geraldine here.
Maybe Barbara Stanwyck, or would she have been older in the late 40s? I don't know. I don't know how the character old.
Yeah, we don't know how old the character is. So,
but I've in Bowl of Fire, she sings and she's amazing in that. So if the part calls for a singer and somebody with a little bit of fire to them, I would say Barbara Stanwyck.
Good call. I'm just gonna say Shelley Winters, just because I think she would have fun with that.
Sure.
That is my answer. All right.
Shelley Winters. Now I want to see Geraldine's story.
I know. Okay, so let's get to some of these other Best Picture nominees real quick. We already touched on this quite a bit, but let's talk about The Heiress.
Yes.
So yeah, Olivia de Havilland in The Heiress. As the kids say, she did that. I mean... truly a remarkable performance where she is playing the titular role of the heiress, who is very meek, and people say she's unattractive. So it's sort of a de-glam sort of role for her.
Yeah.
And the character has like a strained relationship with her father, and she's falling in love with the very handsome Montgomery Clift.
Yeah.
And her father sort of thinks he's a gold digger, and that's where a lot of the conflict stems from. And I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but there is a turn that Olivia's character takes in the film that is chilling.
Yes, it's a great performance, and it is a very good movie because of the great performance in it from Olivia de Havilland. She deserved that Oscar, and it is a deserving Best Picture nominee, I think.
Mm-hmm. I still just can't really get over that moment where she takes that turn, and I think like even her voice changes and her demeanor is all different, and she becomes a lot more hardened to the world. And her line where she says, "I can be very cruel. I've been taught by masters." Woo!
Yeah,
it's an incredible performance. Her eyebrows, I love. They just say so much. And I tweeted about this already, but if more of film Twitter saw this performance, I think they would stan it so hard. Just to put it bluntly, it is the story of a woman snapping and saying she's had enough. And I think a certain section of film Twitter loves this shit.
Yes.
And I think
women unraveling.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes, exactly. So also I think Ralph Richardson, who plays her father, is very good and maybe deserved to win.
Yeah. And Montgomery Clift is gorgeous in this film. It's not much of a part. He's basically the eye candy, but he looks so beautiful.
Yeah. Again, I mean, you can see why she would just be like, I want to be with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up to a certain point. Yeah. Well, we got some questions about this too. So this was from Joey Ailman, who said, do you think Monty Clift deserved a nom for The Heiress? Personally, I would just nominate him for reading a phone book if I could. That's what he said, not me. But what do you think? Would you have nominated Monty Clift?
I don't think so. I think it's sort of the part that you get. It's like Brad Pitt in Thelma and Louise. You get to come in.
That's a good comparison, yeah.
And people see you and they're like, oh, I want to see more of this guy. He's so beautiful. Let's see if there is more to him. And then there is. And
there
you
is a
see
lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see it in both their careers. So I don't think he deserved the nomination.
Yeah. I probably would not nominate him, but there have been worse performances nominated, so yeah. Also, this is from a user by the name of Steve. No, not that Steve, the other one. So I don't know the backstory there, but anyway, why wasn't Miriam Hopkins nominated for Best Supporting Actress for The Heiress? She was coming off a 6-year hiatus. She was nominated for a Golden Globe, one of 2 people total nominated in that category that year, and she was a prior Oscar nominee. So Miriam Hopkins plays the aunt in The Heiress, who's trying to set up her daughter, or her niece. And,
it's a good part that usually, and it's a crowd pleasing part. Like I remember I saw the last Broadway revival of The Heiress, and Judith Ivey played that part, and she completely like stole the show away from Jessica Chastain. So it's a good part. So I don't know, maybe it's just the year and who was nominated.
Well, having seen Come to the Stable, I would not say that it was a competitive year. Let's put it that way. So I do think it's very odd that Miriam Hopkins was not nominated. Maybe it's just the fact that, again, she was coming off a 6-year hiatus, so she hadn't really been in the discussion very much at the time. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, this was from Catherine Short, who said, William Wyler is known for making films that feel completely different from one another, but would you say The Heiress feels of a piece with any of his other films?
I think it does. I mean, I could see it like of a piece of the movies he has done with Betty Davis, for instance, who was Olivia's favorite person and best friend. So he has done different types of movies, but this is of a piece of other movies that he has done, especially in that time period.
Yeah. And also very woman-centric films. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say it's pretty of a piece, and also got the added prestige factor to it. Let's get to the other 2 Best Picture nominees here. You told me beforehand that you have not seen Battleground or 12 O'Clock High, but that's okay.
Have you?
Yes, I just watched them both for this episode. Yeah, because I had not seen them before. I'll just go through this real quick. So Battleground is a war film, and of course we have to remember we're in an era where World War II was very, very recent.
Yes.
Very fresh in people's minds. People were still recovering from it, and this takes place during the Battle of the Bulge, and we're just following this regiment as they try to survive the war, and also we see a lot of them bonding with each other and having some fun, passing the time, that sort of thing. And war movies usually really aren't my thing, but this does have some nice character moments in it, and it's very technically accomplished with the cinematography and the production design. I can imagine that this would maybe be the film that would win Best Director nowadays.
Oh, okay.
And not win Picture, if you know what I'm saying. Just kind of on a craft level.
Okay, so it's like a marvel of
technical
craft.
achievement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's also very tense, and you can sort of feel the weariness of the men as they're going through all this hellishness, basically. And James Whitmore is nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He's the commanding officer. It's a short performance, quite good, and again, would have been a more deserving winner than what we got. So just on 12 O'Clock High, the other war film in the race this year, my man Gregory Peck is here. Speaking of great eyebrows.
Yes.
Playing a general who sort of has to corral his group of men together who they're not very disciplined. And I think it's a little overshadowed here by Battleground, which just has a lot more emotional stakes going on there. But this it's solid, you know. There's some interesting stuff going on just with Gregory Peck's character eventually having a breakdown when he thinks that some of his men have been lost. But on the whole, I don't find this to be that memorable of a film. And our Best Supporting Actor winner comes from this year, Dean Jagger. He's kind of an older lieutenant who has a drinking problem. I don't really get the win, to be honest.
First time I ever hear this name.
Yeah, Dean Jagger.
Yeah. So do you think 12 O'Clock High and Battleground sort of canceled each other out if you thought that technically Battleground was so well done that maybe it should have won Best Picture or at least Director?
I think that's almost definitely what happened, yes. Because they cover so much similar ground and are about the same war, and it's just that Battleground is so much more of a satisfying emotional experience. Where, you know, with 12 O'Clock High, you have Gregory Peck playing a very stoic man through most of it, which he would do a lot of. But that's, you know, I don't know if that people could relate to that as much as just the experience of these young guys and their bond in Battleground. So, yeah, that's all I got on those two. Not necessarily my favorites in this lineup, but I definitely understand why they are nominated because of the social relevance.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to our Should Have Been a Contender segment. And this is where we talk about other films that came out in 1949, not nominated for Best Picture. Murtada, did you have any in particular you wanted to talk about here? Good or bad, it doesn't even matter.
I mean, I think one that just because of its stature in film history and was released that year is The Third Man. It's a movie, you know, a lot of cinephiles love, and it is a great movie.
It was released this year technically, but it did get nominations the following year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but still it did come out in 1949. It's just one of those weird eligibility things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the only other one is the Ozu, the late spring.
Yes.
Which is also a movie that stood the test in time and is like a movie that has to be seen. And that one came that year too. Yeah.
I definitely also wanted to talk about Late Spring here. I think it's so beautiful. I think it's about this young woman who lives at home with her father, and she's very happy living there, and there is this pressure to find her a husband, but she doesn't really want to leave her father living alone. And the performance by Setsuko Hara is just heartbreaking because she has this smile and you see it throughout the film, but it's just one of those smiles that you know is just hiding so much bittersweet emotion behind it, where you can just see her heart breaking as she realizes what she's going to have to do and be without her father.
Yeah. It's a very subdued performance, but it's heartbreaking, and it fills the screen despite its it's how quiet it is.
Yeah, just a gorgeous film, beautifully made, like a lot of Ozu's films. And if you want to watch it, it is now on the Criterion channel if you have that. So definitely recommend.
And it's a film that appears on all lists of like the best movies of all time. So I think if you haven't watched it, you will definitely have a good time.
And I don't know if the eligibility would have made it different for the US and Oscar nominations or any of that, but this was at a time where we did not even have a foreign language film category. It was just special honors for one film that came out per year, and this was not honored with that. But I would argue that it should have been. I also want to talk about On the Town, which is a musical with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, and Jules Munchin as these sailors who are on shore leave in New York City, where they just have 24 hours to live it up. And truly one of the horniest films I've ever seen. The amount of suggestiveness is a lot.
Really?
It's a lot.
That's the first time I ever hear that about On the Town. I haven't seen it, but I don't think anybody I've ever talked to or mentioned it ever mentions that.
Yeah, everyone is really just hopped up on something. They're just ready to go to town, as it were. But it has just like a really a fun energy to it, and I adore Gene Kelly, as we know.
Yes,
the music is pretty good overall. Also, the women that they pair up with in the film are all really great, fantastic, also very horny. Especially Betty Garrett as a cab driver, who is very frank and no nonsense about what she wants. Not the most earth-shattering musical in the world, but it's just another very fun Stanley Donen musical. Question from Mr. Mistopheles. Do you think On the Town was robbed of a Best Picture nomination like I do? I would say no, personally. Like I said, I think it's very fun. Just a little bit derivative of other musicals that are better. So I would say it's fine with what it got, which was a win for its score. Did you want to talk any about Pinky?
We can, yes.
Okay.
So Pinky, I mean, there is a connection, right? Because Pinky was released the same year from the same studio.
Yeah.
And it starred Gene Crane, and apparently Linda Darnell really wanted that part. But for some reason, they gave it to Gene Crane. And Pinky is about a woman called Pinky who is black, but passes for white. And the story is about her coming to terms with does she want to live? There is a white man that she's engaged to, and he wants her to leave her grandmother, who is played by who's played by Ethel Waters.
Right.
To leave her grandmother back and move in with him and basically pass for the rest of her life. Or there's another offer from another doctor in town who wants her to come and help him with educating young black women in the town, somewhere in the South that they live in. Ethel Barrymore, who was also nominated for an Oscar, plays the employer of her grandmother, who is a mean old white woman, but she also is a truth-telling mean old white woman. And both older women sort of help her come to the decision in the end. I mean, the movie is surprisingly okay, but it's just, the casting is awful because Jean Crane does not look anything like a black person. The whitewashing in that casting is just completely unravels the movie because in the end, she has to give this big speech about how, as a black woman, she's going to do this and that. You just want to laugh or turn it off or something like that. Have you seen it?
I have not. I've stayed away from it, to be honest.
I mean, it has things to say, and sometimes you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's just like the major flow of the whitewashing and the casting of casting a white actress to play a black person is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I'm seeing now how Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne were interested in the film.
Yes. And they would have obviously been, we don't even have to say it. They would have been more appropriate.
Yeah. This is just wild.
And I think
reading the production of it, yeah.
It is so wild. I mean, Linda Darnell at least has dark hair. Like, I think Jean Crane is blonde or red haired.
Yeah.
So, which you can tell that she has lighter hair. So anyway, not that just having dark hair means you could play black, but still.
Yeah. I'm just reading this quote from John Ford, who was fired from the film and later replaced with Elia Kazan. And John Ford was not happy with the casting of Jean Crane. And he said, Jean Crane was a sweet girl, but she was like a Sunday school teacher. I did my best with her, but she didn't have any fire. The only good thing about her was that it went so far in the direction of no temperament that you felt Pinky was floating through all of her experiences without reacting to them, which is what passing is. Okay.
Yeah. I don't even understand the nomination, frankly. Ethel Barrymore is the standout performance in that because she's the one between the two older women in the cast. She's the one who has more to do, and it's sort of a fun part. And she is very funny every time she's on screen. So I get that nomination. But I don't get the nomination for Jean Crane. It's she doesn't really do anything, and he's right when he says she doesn't have fire.
Yeah.
She just sort of glides through this movie. She's completely unbelievable, and not just because she's a white woman playing a black woman.
Yikes. Well, also we have Ethel Waters here becoming the second black actress after Hattie McDaniel to be nominated. So there's that. But yeah.
Well,
I don't know if I'm convinced on seeing it as much, but certainly interesting.
It's interesting to see it as an artifact of the time,
right?
But yes, it's not like there's no other reason to see it.
Yes.
Another movie that, if we're talking about movies that could have been nominated is White Heat, which is the James Cagney gangster movie. I don't know if you've seen that, but it is. I've seen it. It's a very fun, gangster movie, but I think it's been very it's been important in that it inspired a lot of filmmakers we like. I mean, Scorsese always talks about it. I have heard him at least a couple of times in interviews bring it up. So it was probably an influential movie to him.
Yeah.
And it is a movie people who like James Cagney also bring it up a lot, and it was from 1949.
This is true, and it's nominated for Best Motion Picture Story, but was not the winner.
Well, it's certainly more influential than most of these Best Picture nominees, except maybe A Letter to Three Wives.
Yeah. Just full disclosure for people listening here, once I get to the 40s, a lot of my watching kind of just drops off a cliff. So I will just say that a lot of films from the 40s I just still have not seen. So that includes White Heat, sadly.
Yeah.
But
it's good. I think
I've heard it's very people talk about it all the time.
If you want to choose between White Heat and Pinky, there's just no choice. Just go with White Heat.
There you go. Also, we have The Fallen Idol, which is nominated for director. This was Carol Reed getting nominated for Best Director for this. He would get a nomination the following year for The Third Man.
Yes.
And The Fallen Idol I also just watched this past week. It's about this boy in London who is idolizing his father's butler, and he soon comes to realize that the butler is not all that. And he sort of plans to leave his wife for a younger woman, and eventually there's a murder, and the boy really becomes involved in this case as a witness. So lots of juicy drama there, and the kid is a little precocious, but Bobby Henry plays the boy, has the great wide-eyed innocence to him that really works. And also just on a technical level, just like The Third Man, it's beautifully shot. Beautifully shot. Film noir sort of film. So there's that. I also want to touch on Come to the Stable, which I don't necessarily love, but I watched it for this because I was so curious about this film about nuns who want to buy a hospital in New England that managed to get 7 Oscar nominations this year.
Wow, that's a lot of nominations.
Yep, and it didn't win a single one of them. But this is just...
It's the Irishman of its time.
I guess so. It's just like a cute little story about a pair of nuns who want to buy a hospital in, I think it's Connecticut. And Loretta Young and Celeste Holm play the nuns. They both get Oscar nominations for it, which is a choice. I mean, they're fine. I just don't know where the acclaim for this comes from, other than it's just charming.
Yeah.
Vaguely.
I mean, we don't know what was happening in
This is
1949.
true.
It struck a chord somewhere, somehow, with people.
One of the reasons I wanted to highlight this is because Celeste Holm plays a character by the name of Sister Scholastica.
Oh my, what a name.
I mean, that sounds like a drag name to me.
Oh, yes, for sure.
And, but she is very good at tennis, and we see her in her nun's outfit playing tennis.
Oh, wow.
In order to get the funds for the hospital. I mean,
now
what a movie.
You've sold me on this, Gavin. I want to see Celeste Holm playing tennis in Nun's Habit.
It's quite a sight to behold. Also, the nuns are driving a Jeep around town, and they're like honking their horns and being cheeky. And they're riding bicycles. I mean, it's cute. What can I say? I imagine that it just charmed enough voters to where it got all those nominations.
Yeah.
Which, again, is kind of wild to wrap your head around when you actually sit down and watch the film. Because you're just like, okay, I mean, sure.
Maybe.
Yeah. We got a question about Come to the Stable, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
From our friend Andrew Carden, who said, did Come to the Stable deserve its 0 for 7 Oscar night shutout? Also, thoughts on why it missed in picture despite so many other noms? Yeah.
I think you've answered that with what you said about the movie.
Yeah. I think it might just be a little too slight for Best Picture, I would argue. But as far as whether it deserved its shutout, let's just take a look here. We had it Loretta Young getting in for Best Actress. Can't say that she was better than Olivia de Havilland, so there's that. Supporting Actress gets in 2 for Elsa Lanchester and Celeste Holm. No and no. So there's that. And what else do we have? I think cinematography somehow is nominated. And art direction. And anything else here? What am I missing?
I don't know.
Oh, Best Motion Picture Story.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it deserved any of those. Even as nominations, to be honest. But
they were generous to it in 1949.
Extremely so. I just do think it was a case of people being like, this is just really cute and refreshing and fun. So, anyway, if you want to watch it, it is available online. So, I also want to just touch on another adaptation we have here of Little Women. So, not quite the Greta Gerwig version.
This is the one with Elizabeth Taylor as Amy, right?
Exactly. Yes. And we have Janet Leigh as well as Meg. June Allison is Jo March. And she is not the most engaging Jo March out there, but the film as a whole just has a very nice atmosphere to it. The Technicolor sets and the great costumes, and it has all the great sort of craft elements to it. But honestly, I think the Gerwig version sort of spoiled me with Little Women adaptations, to where even some of these others just don't quite have the same impact of what she did with it. But decent enough.
I mean, I always have like the Winona Ryder one I like because it was the one I first saw, and I've seen the Katharine Hepburn one, and Katharine Hepburn is a pretty great Jo. But this is the only one I haven't seen. I think I saw. There must have been. I saw something, maybe another one, but that was for TV.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of Little Women, and this is the one I haven't seen.
Well, this is not one of the well-regarded ones, but I just wanted to touch on it here. Well, this was a question we got from Lucino Vishanti, who said, Deborah Kerr scored her first nomination this year. Out of her 6 nominations, which one would you give her the win? My choice would be The King and I. My choice would also be The King and I, for the record.
I mean, I really love her in From Here to Eternity. Like that's the one. That's my favorite performance. Although I do like her in The King and I too. But I don't know. Is 1954 the year of Judy Garland in A Star Is Born?
Yes. Well, 1953 is when she's nominated, technically, for From Here to Eternity.
Okay. I mean, I'm on the Wikipedia page and I don't know what. Yeah.
I'm doing it based on film year, not Oscar year.
Yeah. So she lost to Audrey Hepburn in Roman Holiday.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which I actually probably would have given her. I would have given Audrey Hepburn the win there, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. That's such a Star Is Born performance from Audrey Hepburn that she deserved to win it.
But if I look at the year of The King and I, that was Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia. I mean, I would have given it to Deborah Kerr personally over Ingrid Bergman. But yeah,
probably that's the one she came maybe closest to winning.
Yeah.
But maybe sometimes, I don't know. I like Ingrid Bergman with 3 Oscars. Sometimes you just never, you never get nominated the right year.
Don't I know it? I know all about that.
Old wounds, Kevin. I'm sorry.
It's just never your time, is it? But sometimes it's one person's time 4 different times. Anyway.
Yes. I mean, frankly, Glenn Close, her year was the year of Dangerous Liaisons, and I can't believe that they just didn't do that.
Thank you for being on the right side of history.
Yes. And Jodie Foster would have won for The Silence of the Lambs, which was really her time.
Exactly. So if the Oscars had a do-over, that would be towards the top of my list. If they could look back and take an Oscar away. Anyway, let's see. Do we have any more questions about this year? Another question we got from Kevin Clowder said, do you think the reputation of Baby It's Cold Outside would be different if people knew that in Neptune's Daughter, the romantic parts sung by Ricardo Montalban and Esther Williams had a comedic counterpoint from Betty Garrett and Red Skelton? So Baby It's Cold Outside is our Best Original Song winner from Neptune's Daughter. I will say I don't know if people even know that it's from a film.
Yeah,
So
I
I
didn't
don't
know
think-
until this minute.
Yeah, so I don't think people know the context of what it meant in the context of the film. So I would say, yes, maybe things would be different, but it's still a creepy song. So what can you do? Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all we got for questions. Any other thoughts on 1949 before we take our final break?
Nope.
All right. Well, interesting year to sort of kick off the 40s here. There will certainly be more interesting stuff to come, especially with 1948. But when we come back, we will be delivering our verdict as to whether we think All the King's Men deserved Best Picture or if A Letter to Three Wives deserved it more.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have seen Hollywood at its Sunday best. As great as the temptation is to share in the dignity of the evening and add to the added contribution of well-deserved superlatives, about the only thing left to say is, meet the champion. And the nominations for the Best Picture of the year are All the King's Men, a Robert Rawson production, Columbia, Battleground, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, The Heiress, Paramount, A Letter to Three Wives, 20th Century Fox, and 12 O'Clock High, 20th Century Fox. The envelope, please. The winner, All the King's Men, Robert Rawson, Columbia.
Sir Robert Rawson is coming to the stage to accept the award for All the King's Men. Great picture starring two of our winners already this evening, Mr. Broderick Crawford, the Best Actor, and Mercedes McCambridge, the Best Supporting Actress.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think All the King's Men deserve Best Picture or if A Letter to Three Wives really deserved it. Murtada, what is your verdict?
I would say the letter between the two, definitely A Letter to Three Wives deserves to win Best Picture, so that would get my vote. But I'm also, maybe The Heiress should have won.
That was going to be my next question, too. Yeah. I would also say that between the two, that I personally would prefer A Letter to Three Wives, as much as I understand why people like and voted for All the King's Men.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would also agree with you on what you just said, which is that I think The Heiress is probably the best of the lineup. And this was a little bit of a difficult call for me to make as far as what the runner-up was, because The Heiress led nominations with 8, and it won 4. What really sold me on A Letter to Three Wives is the directing and screenplay wins, which is crucial, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with The Heiress, I'm sure that it came pretty close as well, pretty broad support across many different branches, and would have been a very good winner. Do you have any other film from 1949 outside of The Heiress that maybe would have taken it for you?
I mean, we talked about Late Spring.
Yeah.
That would take it without a doubt. But
Probably
from the
true.
nominees, it wasn't even nominated or in consideration. Right. But yeah, it's from what I've seen from 1949, like movies, Late Spring definitely stands above all of them.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much in lockstep with this. We pretty much agree on that. So, well, thank you so much, Murtada, for joining me today. This was a blast getting into the 40s. And I appreciate you taking me through it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you about The Three Wives and 1949.
Yeah, and sorry to those other wives. Well, I appreciate it. And tell the people where they could find more from you on the internet.
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at ME_says. And also I have a podcast about the films of Cate Blanchett called Sundays with Cate, which you can follow on Instagram and on Twitter at Sundays with Cate. We just finished our first season of the podcast, which is 13 episodes. We covered 13 movies, and coming within a couple of weeks, we will start season 2 of the podcast with a mini series on her Oscar-winning performance in Blue Jasmine. So if you're interested in Oscars and Blanchett and in Blue Jasmine, be on the lookout for that.
Very exciting. And there should be plenty of crossover with this show and people who like Oscars and Cate Blanchett. So please, everyone, listen to his show. And for me, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. The show is at Oscar Runner Up. You can also follow my writing at goldderby.com. I never mentioned that, but support my work. And for more of And the Runner-Up Is, you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. And if you simply can't get enough, I have a Patreon, and it is at patreon.com/andtherunnerup_is, where you will hear bonus episodes like the one with Murtada here talking about Lost in Translation. And also, I keep forgetting to mention this, but I now have a website exclusively for And the Runner-Up Is, where you can find every episode of the show, plus an archive of all the results for all of the Twitter rankings that we've done on the Twitter page. And you can find that at andtherunnerup_is.com. So, thank you so much, Murtada.
Thank you.
Again.
Of course. Anytime.
And I will bid you all adieu.